Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're going to be grilling Father Rich. What is it like being a priest?
Yeah, we're going to ask Father Rich a lot of the questions that you have asked us. Like, what does a priest do all day? What are some of the struggles of living your life as a priest? And what are some of the unexpected aspects of living in the clerical state?
I've always said it's an open book, like I'm happy to give my testimony, but I'm a little nervous about these two guys asking me these questions. So let's begin, I guess.
You're in the hot seat.
Well, we're back for another episode. I'm kind of excited. I've got a few questions in my pocket.
Great. Yeah, this is like a whole episode of Inquisitions. I don't know how in the world we got to this. It's been a long day already in my priestly life.
All right,
it's about to get longer.
Oh, Lord.
How much money do you take out of the thing every?
Zero.
No, so
that's an easy one.
A lot of people have asked us, and a lot of people, whether they're young men discerning the priesthood, whether they're people who just want to know what happens with the priest in their lives, what it actually is like being a priest, because it is a very unique vocation among all vocations, right? Everybody, lay people, lay women, lay men, consecrated women, religious, priests, monks, they all have a vocation. But I think the vocation as a priest, there's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of unknowing about what priests actually do. So we're going to try to get into some of that today. Ask Father Rich some of the questions that you've submitted to us, and let's see, have him answer. So Father Rich, thank you for being gracious and being willing to answer these questions.
Well, in all sincerity, it's an honor because it's an honor that I haven't pursued myself. It's something that God has certainly called me to. And I really appreciate the fact that the seminary, the church, and my bishop have affirmed that discernment. And I really wouldn't be here without them. So, the helpful aspects of how someone becomes a priest and the relationships therein is everything. So I really stand ready to serve every day. And I'm very, very blessed to be called to this way of life. And it really is a joy. So I'm happy to share the joy of the ministry with you guys today and all of our viewers and listeners.
You're a host and a guest at the same time.
And on the hot seat.
Transcending universal realities.
So I do think that it's important to make the distinction that Father Rich is a diocesan priest. So, the realities of the priest of maybe a religious order is going to be different because they're going to have some particularities to whatever religious order or confraternity or whatever it is they're a member of. But Father Rich is a priest of the Diocese of St. Augustine, and that's going to have a different life than maybe a Franciscan or Jesuit priest, right? So Father Rich, I think the number one question people have of priests, right, is celibacy. How do you live with celibacy day to day? You're not devoid of the human chemical reactions that men have. You're not. So how do you live with being celibate day to day, knowing that you're married to the church and not to a woman?
A while back, I turned to a brother priest who was an older brother priest. And, I expressed to him, after I got ordained, and I was probably, I don't know, like maybe 2 years in at the time, maybe a year or 2 years in. And he said, Rich, how you doing? And I said, I'm doing great. I love the ministry. It's awesome. And he just kept on digging deeper and deeper and like looking in my eyes and like, no, but how are you doing? How are you doing? And he just kept on asking me the same question to the point where I'm like, well, one thing is, you don't really know celibacy in the seminary until you start living it. And it's a totally different reality. I try to express that in not so many words, as being someone who's very brief in commentary all the time. But like I just communicated that, and it immediately turned into Rich is in a vocational crisis, and I wasn't saying that. The truth is celibacy, there's a number of people out there who say, oh, that's not going to be the hard thing when you really live out your priesthood. What's going to be difficult is obedience when you're asked to do something that you may not want to do. That obedience would be more difficult. For me, I've been very blessed in my assignments, not to say that they've all been rosy, but at the same time, that hasn't been a challenge for me. Celibacy has been a challenge for me. It has been a challenge, but it's a challenge that I meet with discipline. And the discipline of celibacy allows me to give of myself to an extent that would be absolutely impossible if I had a family. And the discipline of the celibacy that I'm called to is also an invitation in intimacy with Jesus Christ in his celibacy. He gives of his entire life in service of others, and he does so to the point of loving, to the point of crucifixion, placing himself in harm's way. And I can't help but think of the celibacy of St. Maximilian Kolbe reflecting the celibacy of Jesus Christ on the cross. St. Maximilian Kolbe very easily expressed, I will give of my life so this father whose wife is mourning that he's in Auschwitz, his children that are mourning and crying and weeping that their father is separated from them, would be able to return to them and be a father, be a biological father, and help their children grow. And he so quickly gave of his life. Well, I look at celibacy in a similar way. Now, I'm not anywhere close to Maximilian Kolbe, certain nowhere close to Jesus, but I feel invited by both of them to live out this total gift of self. And celibacy is certainly the structures for me to grow continually in my masculinity and to discipline those movements that is in every single man. And I would be lying to you if I said, I never struggle. I would be absolutely lying to you. So to be truthful, yeah, it is a struggle, but it's a struggle that has produced a lot of fruit in ministry. And I want to just share a quick story. I was like 2-3 years in the priesthood at this time at my home parish, St. Elizabeth. And I remember one night, by myself in my room, and I'm complaining to God like I normally do. And I'm like, Jesus, man, Lord, this celibacy thing just stings. I want to be like, I want to have, my wife or whatever. I want to have like lit. And then next thing you know, I'm not even lying. Middle of the night, my phone rings, emergency line, right? And I pick it up, and it's this nurse who's calling on behalf of this elderly woman. So I said, I'll be over there shortly. Went out to the house, got into the, went into the room, started speaking with her. And I sit on the edge of this 90-year-old lady's bed, and we're sitting there and we're having the deepest conversation. It was so beautiful. But I was on the edge of her bed right next to her, and I was kind of slipping off the bed, and I had her hand clasped to mine. And I turned to her and I said, sweetie, you're going to have to scoot over just a little bit for me, because if I fall off this bed, you're coming with me. And then she says, oh, well, what will all the ladies say at church? It was just like the cutest thing that this older lady said. You never lose that, right? You never lose that. And it was just such a beautiful experience, almost of Jesus saying, like, yeah, you may not have someone in your bed and you're living out celibacy, but look at these amazing moments of deep spiritual intimacy that you're sharing with people in your day-to-day life. Another brother, big shout out to Father Tom Dillon from the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee. I still remember this talk when he came back as a cleric to share in the seminary about celibacy. He said, a number of people he'll receive in marriage counseling are struggling with intimacy. And he said, where my life, I am brought into the intimate levels of people's lives every single day. And there is an element of that is very, very supportive to our overall emotional makeup and how we experience joy in the midst of our discipline, really. So I guess I'd kind of answer along those lines that, celibacy is a discipline. It can be challenging at times, but it opens you up for the most fruitful ministry and intimacy with Jesus Christ, serving the mystical bride of his in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, so I got a question to kind of follow that up. You've had different assignments, like you have an assignment now at a parish. You're a pastor. It's your first time doing that. You've been a vicar, pastoral vicar. You've been in school for years, full time, and then, helping out at a parish. Do you find that the circumstances around your assignment sometimes lend towards or against a different kind of fight of the celibacy? Because, I noticed there's a big change in you when you became a pastor. Like I've seen it. And so I'm wondering if it's more difficult to live celibacy in different circumstances than others. I don't know if that's even a thing.
Mm-hmm. No, I think if I didn't have the busyness of my life, the fact that like my day, like I have to fight for my day off.
Right.
Like I get one day off a week and I have to fight for it. If I don't fight for it, I'm easily consumed with messaging and questions and requests and people suffering. Everybody's suffering. And then,
Father Rich, I've talked to you on your days off so many times, and it's not that you're fighting other people saying, don't call me. You're fighting your instinct to want to help other people. You're fighting your instinct to keep on giving of yourself against your own self-care or your own sustainability. So I wanted to make that so people didn't think, well, he's trying to shut people out on that day off.
And that's
and
that's a good point.
I'm glad that you clarified that, because it's true. I mean, when somebody calls me with a severe issue or need, like, what am I going to do? It's like if your child, if it's your son or your daughter that's in a hospital and in really a rough spot, like you go, like there's no question. But that can become, like an everyday thing. And I have to discipline my day off so that I am at the top of my pastoral care for people. So I know when I need to get away and get a breather. And the beauty of it too is like my parishioners will say, Father, you need to get away, right? You need to go get a breather, go on a retreat, go on a vacation. And it's nice to hear, because they see how much I am so passionate about what I do. But I do genuinely think, to your question, Delacroix, which I think is a great question, there are different, I guess, missions that would be entrusted to you. So when I was first ordained, I was sent to one of the largest parishes in the diocese. And then on top of that, I was sent to a high school that was in need of greater marketing efforts and to build the enrollment and kind of create an energy around, boosting, the student body at that time. And it was fantastic. And it was just enough work for me to do, where I was busy and I was locked in and I was focused on my goals and working and collaborating with the people that I was with. And it was really a fabulous joy. So I find if I'm busy and if I'm doing work that I'm absolutely engaged in, namely just being a priest, I'm going to be happy. If if I enter into laziness, if I'm, trying to, if I play video game, I don't play video games, but if I'm playing video games every single evening, like that would get really old. And, and certainly if I didn't have the work that I'm doing right now, I think it would probably lead me to get into a little bit more of a struggle, I think.
Yeah. I remember one time I was with Father T, right? Tetlow, and he was my first vocation director. And that's how I met you. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I don't think you were with us that day, but we had a really packed day. I was just kind of following him around and watching him be a priest. And we went to Chinakalo, the community. We served a lot of people in need there. There were some other events and things that we went to. There was, him in the confessional while I prayed. And, he's just a high energetic guy. And we came back to the rectory and we went, our separate ways. And he said, how could I have a wife? Like I've received so much love from God today. I can't possibly quite share it with a woman, right? Like, it's just like, and I think it comes from, at least the way I saw it was, it came from the ability to serve in persona Christi and seeing with Christ's eyes, the ministry of his church and how he calls you to serve those that he directs you towards, and the love that you see him share with them through that. And it fills you back up. When you see that, it fills you back up. And allows you to be super happy, but also filled so much with the Holy Spirit. He's just like, I can't possibly have a wife, Ryan, like, that's what I saw that day. And that really gave me a glimpse into, the priesthood that I had not had before that.
He was so good at doing that, wasn't he? I mean, just incredible at inviting you into his priesthood and his day-to-day, going to the hospital, going to Chinakalo, visiting a home, a house blessing, whatever it was, he would invite you in. And that was where I started to see a glimpse of priesthood as well, without a doubt. And what an important step that was for me, as too, is just, wow, I never realized how beautiful the priesthood is. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Delacroix, because there are many, many days where, you put in a 12, a 14, a 16-hour day, and then you come home and your heart is so full and you've been talking so much with everybody that really all you want to do is kind of sit there in silence in your chapel, or just sit there on the couch and just kind of review the day with God and just say, wow, like, thank you for that. But you don't want to really talk about it. You don't want to talk about the details of everything or kind of unpack everything. You just want to sit and revel in the fact, like, wow, God, you've called me to this way of life, and I'm just beyond grateful. I'm just so grateful for it.
So that's one of the questions that a lot of people have is, and I think we've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but what is an average day in your life like? What is your schedule like? Maybe on a weekday and maybe on a Sunday, right? Because there's obviously going to be differences on a Saturday for that matters. But what is the day in the life, just from a schedule and a logistical standpoint? I mean, we don't have to get into all the details, but what's your itinerary book look like for an average day as a priest?
And then after that, I want to ask you about what practices make you healthy as a priest,
I think that's a really important question. And I definitely want to unpack that, because you can definitely develop unhealthy, things in the process of priesthood and being busy. So to your question, it's different for every priest because it's always associated with your assignment. So I'll share my experiences. So typically, let's say at my first assignment when I had the large parish and then St. Joseph Academy, wake up early morning, say 6 o'clock, get a little bite, coffee, hit the showers, get dressed, shoot over for the 7 a.m. mass, finish that mass within a 20-minute window, hop in the car, drive up, celebrate a mass roughly just prior to 8. You got to keep that mass under 20 minutes as well. Get the school started. You might have some administrative meetings, depending on your day. You'd visit your theology classes, have conversation. If there's counseling, there may be a kid who's suicidal, a kid who's really struggling after a breakup. You could have a kid that's been a behavior problem and you're trying to come at it from a pastoral element of it as opposed to just immediate discipline. Find out what's going on in the kid's life and give them an opportunity. Confessions throughout the day, adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, facilitating prayer. And then afterwards, if you have spiritual direction sessions after school, I might shoot over to the mission grounds, hear confession, spiritual direction for like a half an hour to an hour per person. At that time, I served a lot of the staff at Our Lady of La Leche, Mission Nombre de Dios, which is a national shrine. We're actually celebrating on Tuesday the Nativity of Mary, which is also the birthday really of when, Father Lopez and companions first came on the shores, 1565, erected a cross and established the first Catholic community in the United States of America. So great history there. So I would spend a lot of time there and then come back to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. There may be something going on in the evening at the church like RCIA or a youth-oriented effort during the weekday. So you might have like youth group or another bereavement group where people, were sick when a loved one died and they're still grieving. I still remember coming back to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and there was a really cool ministry that was started by Maria Didis. Big shout out to her. She had Tutu Tuesday, and it was all these kids. It was like all these 2-3-year-old girls learning how to do ballet poses, like the first 4 poses. And so I would come and knock on the door, and I'd knock, and And then they would say, come in. And I would open up the door and I would say, my fair ladies. And then they would all do their like curtsy. And then I would say, what's the first position? They would do the first position. I'd go through all the positions. And then I would say, what's the Father Richard position? And all the kids would go like this. I go. So now these girls are like, you know, in middle school. Yeah. And I still ask them, I'm like, what's the Father Richard position? And they're still like, So, you know, like that. And then, you know, evening prayer. And then you like go out to dinner. There might be a dinner or something like that. Or, you know, a family that wants you to come over their house, bless their house. You know, you go.
How often does it happen that you go over to somebody's house and you hate the food?
That has never happened, thank God.
Never happened?
Nope.
Really?
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm trying.
Is that some kind of like special grace granted to priests by?
You know what?
By the Holy Spirit. You've never been invited over.
I'm highly allergic to cats, and there was a dear brother priest of mine, Father Pervez from Pakistan, and he would come over, and we'd work on English and stuff. He's a good buddy, and we went over to this house, and this cat like jumped up on the table and started licking the cake, and it started eating the cake.
And woman.
And the lady just tried to cut around it, and she dropped a piece of cake on his dish, and his face was so hilarious. So that's I guess like the only time that I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, everybody else, I mean, really for the most part, you know, pretty good food. The other one is Father Leon. When I visited,
I was just about to say that.
Really, bro?
Yes.
I visited Delacroix.
Is he the chicken freezer?
On assignment. Yeah, the chicken.
Yeah.
Dude,
oh, dude, it was
everything, man. And he was Spanish, so his day revolved around a big lunch and a nap. And he was probably in his 70s. Beautiful priesthood. I mean, he was standing up for Black people, you know, during the Southern, you know, issues that were going on there with racism and inequities and.
KKK came in and burnt like a cross on the front of the rectory, and he's like out on the street saying, "I am the pastor."
But let's back up here, because I was, you know, I know this is about the priesthood, but it is a funny story. I was actually stationed there, you know, for the summer, and I worked literally right behind the church, and I respected this guy enormously.
Oh yeah.
And so his big thing was lunch, and you be there for lunch. And so I would
sit
at the table, and he would spill food all over his shirt, and he would go get the food out of the freezer, and it tasted funny. And I went and looked at it, and it was all like 2 years old. I'm like, what is going on? And so, but he would just chow down on this stuff. And I remember I made a move, you know, to try to tell him like, hey, you know, I've got, you know, to work with my dad on a project, and, you know, and I'm taking my lunch break to do that. And he's like, no, you don't take lunch off. Like, you don't take lunch off. Like, this is the time where we sit and talk. And I'm like, oh my God.
We both suffered. I have a very strong, vivid memory of both of us suffering at the lunch table together and looking at each other. But he wasn't always aware of like what was on everybody else's plate. He would just be eating, food would be all over the place, and you know, for sure.
Napkins.
So I don't want to lose Delacroix's question either about what are some of the. Lost it. Well. No, I remembered it for you. I wrote it down. So what are some of the, I guess, the challenges or the dangers of the priestly life that can settle in day to day? What are some of the unhealthy practices that priests really have to struggle with, fight against?
Mm-hmm. So I think it comes down to, you know, the personal needs that you have, and your personal needs cannot be compromised by other people's wants. So what I always try to differentiate between is, okay, is this somebody's want? They want me to come over socially. It's different if I'm going over to somebody's house to bless their house, but I can't go over and bless their house and it's going to take 4 hours or 5 hours to go do that, right? So I try to do my house blessings throughout the day or at lunch or maybe on the weekend, so that I'm not occupying that amount of time, because I can't respond to everybody's wants. And then my own personal needs for prayer, for healthy eating, for exercise and for my own personal friendships, like if I don't have time for that, I will become, my well-being, my equilibrium, my overall mental health, my spiritual health will suffer. So you have to recognize as a priest, because it's very easy, especially when you're newly ordained, to get sucked into everybody's wants and needs.
Yeah.
So you have to differentiate from, okay, this person is presenting a want. This person is presenting a need. I will respond to the needs. If I can, I'll respond to your wants, but not at the expense of my own personal needs. And you, without a doubt, need to have a good, healthy diet, a good, healthy exercise plan, good, healthy friendships. Like you guys are, I love that we get together quarterly and we get to have time together. Like that means a lot to me personally, because just the friendship aspect of it.
Yeah. You're outgoing, like you're an outgoing person. And so relationships for you are a catalyst for your mental health. That's a catalyst for your spiritual health. And it's the same way with me too. My wife knows that I need to go out with my friends and hang out with them because, I come back a better father, that I can't be locked into the home. Whereas some people might need just quiet time with a book or, right.
Yeah.
So I think from a wellness standpoint, now that you're mentioning that, it makes a lot of sense that the plan should be something that would revolve around what it is that makes you, happy,
But I think it's really wise, like you said, that you have to balance your spiritual, your physical health, because even God, the Father, Creator, Almighty, had to take a day off. Didn't have to, he chose to, right?
Yeah.
And that's a model that he gave to everyone to follow. And if your parishioners and the people who depend on you they expect more from you than they do from God, they're going to be, let down. You have to have, like, I notice, like, we'll be talking where you haven't had a vacation in 6-7 months or even a day off really to speak of, and you're starting to get a little frayed around the edges. And Lord knows what I would be like if I didn't have a day or two off, and I get weekends off. You don't, so it's it's a little bit different.
It's
and
also
thank God I have friends like you, you guys that call me out, and and I still remember how many times have Delacrosse like threw me in a plane and like flew me out to go hunting or fishing, and I celebrate Mass, but I'm going to celebrate Mass anyway. And it's just nice to have vacation time. I do get low key jealous when Delacrosse is sending me pictures from Colorado, and I'm like, I'm working right now, but it's all good. I'm happy. But no, like in all seriousness, I'm so blessed. Much like, Delacrosse, the way you were describing Jen really motivates you to go out. Like she knows that you come back a stronger man, a stronger husband, a stronger dad, when you have time to spread your wings and be free and go do different things. And the same thing for my parishioners here. Like they do it all the time. And I am very blessed, because not every priest has a blessing in their parishioners who are just saying, hey, Father, why don't you go out golfing today? Like, why don't you go out and go relax, a little bit? They're constantly motivating me to do that type of stuff. Whether I'm taking that up or not, it depends. But so that's kind of like a life in the day of a priest, and how easily you can work from 7 o'clock in the morning till 4, 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, and not have anything to eat. And then you're eating a whole pizza by yourself, and drinking a beer or two before you start winding down. And that is not healthy. It's very easy to happen, to a priest easily.
Yeah, especially when we're staying with you in your rectory filming the talk show. Hey, I got another question. How do you, because like, I guess you can liken your parish to a family. As a father, I deal with conflict in different ways, with different kids and situations. And sometimes I just lock my bedroom door and tell them to go away. So how do you deal with conflict? Like, cause I got to come out. Did I just like go off?
We don't see your face anymore, but I could hear your voice.
All right.
Wow, our viewership just went up too. Crazy. I don't know.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so I mean,
great.
I'm sure you don't like everyone like interpersonally that you've ever met with at your parish. How do you deal with people that you don't like, that you butt heads with, or the needs and the disagreements of others?
Our numbers are now going down because Delacroix
I'm back.
I'm back. Great question. I think
If you're not,
if you're listening in, Delacroix is going in and out of the feed. So no doubt, like there's going to be personalities that you have the proclivity to like, yeah, I want to hang out with this person all the time. I would love to have this person around the office all the time, but that at the same time, you're also working with personalities that may actually require more time to work with. And, I can say that, yeah, there are people that are more challenging to love and to pastorally care for than others. The worst people are the people who are, nameless, and they'll send criticism in unsigned letters, and they won't open up conversation or dialogue with you. Like those are just impossible people that you can't work with, right? Where I actually welcome critical voices because it gives me perspective that I may not have. So I actually appreciate people like that. And as you get to know people, their makeup is just different than yours. Now, would it be somebody that I'd be like, hey, let's go to Texas and go on a hunt and fishing trip and go have a blast with? Probably not. Like our personalities wouldn't be wanting to do the same thing. Like Jen has to put up and Sheil has to put up as well when Delacroix and I could just talk gibberish for like 3 hours straight and just laugh hysterically and not make any sense at all. There's not many people
talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
There's not many people that you could do that with, but so it can be a challenge. And certainly I think certain other like priests may deal with that in a different way. But for me, I just kind of embrace people wherever they are as best as I can. And just try to appreciate the people that are here, because many of these people that at first you really like, oh my gosh, what a pain in the butt this person is, right, turns into like somebody who's very passionate about the mission of the church and is a very good advocate. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's probably a lot of people out there that you should know that your priest might not like you, so quit being a pain in the butt. I think another question that's kind of like that is, you have to deal with the things that people tell you in confession. You have to deal with a lot of people dying. When people are dealing with tragedy, they call you in. When there's a child or a person in the prime of their life that is cut down young, you have to deal with that. And I know like a lot of first responders and police officers, they develop a lot of psychological trauma from having to deal with the trauma of so many people, right? One person, you have a couple traumas in your life, and it's a lot of baggage. But first responders, priests, and police officers and soldiers have to deal with their own trauma and the traumas of others. How do you deal with that? How do you put that into perspective, and how do you handle having so much kind of, I guess, darkness and trauma that is outside of what would normally occur to a regular person?
You got to have your spiritual director. You have to have somebody you could talk to, because if you're dealing with it by yourself, it will mess with you and it will cripple you, especially when you're responding to abuse cases. Like I worked at Wolfson's Children's Hospital, and the most difficult thing to look at is when a baby is beaten by a parent or by somebody, and you see, you see a kid's head, like all messed up baby.
Yeah.
That type of stuff will mess with you, man. And you got to be able to talk to people about that, and you got to be able to process the anger. You got to be able to process because you start getting really, it messes with you, like that type of stuff.
Take him out.
Exactly. Exactly. And you got, and he, the two times that happened to me, the guys were in custody and stuff. And Horrible. You know, responding to people getting killed or you know, suicide cases. Those circumstances, unfortunately, I've been so immersed in them. I've worked at the morgue. I've worked in prep rooms in the funeral homes. I've seen death a lot for a long time now. So I guess I don't know if I've, you know, accumulated a sense of familiarity with it. Maybe, I don't know. I don't feel uncomfortable around it. The thing that messes with me that I've got to talk about is when people manipulate others and they bold-faced lie to them and they string them along and they manipulate their will. You know, like I've had to step in with people pursuing other people for marriage, and they're manipulating their will. And they're lying, or they're cheating, and you know, there's a number of things like that really, really bugs me. And then I have to leave a counseling session like that to go talk with the kindergarten class in religious education, you know, or go visit the second graders and bring them donuts and try to be like, hey, everybody, you know. So it's like, it could be challenging. Like I had a meeting.
That's got to be just so chaotic almost to deal with, you know, dealing with children happy eating donuts and then, you know, a suicide or, you know, infidelity and dissolving marriages. I mean, that's got to be like almost like a spiritual car crash where you're just getting whiplash from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's days where I can adjust and switch gears pretty quickly. Like, you know, like I really feel like I'm switching gears. Okay, meeting this next person, and I have like the discipline within myself to stop at empathy, which I've learned a lot. If there's any, you know, seminarians who, I know there's a bunch of seminarian brothers that listen to the show, and there's a number of people who are discerning the priesthood and discerning ministry as a way of life. Even if you're looking at lay ministry, there's a lot of lay ministers out there, especially youth ministers. Please read the doctoral dissertation of Edith Stein, Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. It helped me out tremendously. She wrote on the problem of empathy. So that is the title of Edith Stein's doctoral dissertation. Once again, on the problem of empathy.
You can get that at ICS Publications, who are the official distributor and publisher of the works of the Carmelite Order. So ICS Publications, look them up and you can find that work there. I know that one for sure.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Random.
So, you know, she helped me so much because as an Italian, we get very emotional and we kind of lock in our heart, and you know, the blended lines between empathy and compassion take over, and you begin suffering with people. But that's where real ministry stops. When you start suffering with people, you have to be on a stable ground of prayer. And, you know, there are occasions, even still after being 9 years in the clerical life of ministering to people, where I still get sucked into compassion and I begin to emote, you know, what's being transferred. So I have to take time. I've got to go for a rosary walk. I've got to go to the chapel. I've got to go into adoration. I've got to pray my breviary, or go out to the beach for a sunrise or a sunset or something, and just kind of clear myself, clear the, you know, and refocus. Because it can be tough, man, shifting into these different occasions. But if you're prayed up and you're really in a good spot and you're receiving the Eucharist and you got your breviary going well, you could shift pretty well. But when you hit trauma, go to your spiritual director, talk to someone, even if it's just a close friend. I know I have my venting sessions with Jen and Ryan when we get together.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, shifting gears, like you said, about shifting gears. Here's a question I think maybe a little bit lighter, give you an emotional break here that a lot of people have is, when do you wear your collar shirt? When do you wear your priestly clothes? And how often do you not wear them? So do you purposely not wear them when you go to the grocery store to a baseball game or a basketball game? You know, I think a lot of people think that priests wake up and every day they have the same outfit and that's it. They don't even own, you know, a basketball jersey or whatever. So, you know, when do you make those decisions, and do you ever try to blend in and purposely not wear the collar?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because you know that about me. I definitely have my basketball jerseys and my basketball shorts. So, Yeah, I mean, and you're talking to a guy, you know, when I went through Ave Maria University, like I had the perspective of, you know, a priest should wear his clerics, or really at that time in my life, his cassock every day. And, you know, you should be visible. And there's something to say about that. Like, without a doubt, there is something to say about that. But when you start, when you start ministering to people, there's an element of that that's helpful when you're wearing a collar. But then at times, especially in the secular world, when everybody will associate your priesthood with, you know, pedophilia, you know, drunk, maybe, you know, a different lifestyle that's not good because they remember this scandal or that scandal, it may not be the very, very best way to begin the conversation. I definitely, you know, and you guys know this about me, you know, I'll put on civvies a lot when I'm going out. Not that I'm ashamed of my priesthood at all, but I love having conversations with people that ultimately lead, because we are in America, that ultimately lead to, oh, so Rich, what do you do? And I've had some of the most incredible pastoral moments in my life.
I've been there. I've been to some of those. I've seen it.
And it happens to me all the time. And I'm just so grateful to God, because people can just be themselves. Because on the flip note, like, that's the negative way of looking at interchange out in the public. On a good note, like, you're walking around, you know, Publix or whatever, or grocery store like Vons or Kroger or, you know, Piggly Wiggly. And you're walking around and people will see you and they'll say, oh, good morning, Father. Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father. Oh, Father, how are you? Oh, Father, good to see you. And it's all
Yo,
stuff
Father,
like,
what's up?
or, hey, priest, what are you doing? You know, and it's, you know, it's not exchange at a deeper level. It's very molto formale. Like, it's very, very formal. It doesn't enter into a conversational nature. One of my favorite, if I could share this one story, which I don't think I've shared. I don't even know if you guys know the story. I was flying into San Diego, got in super, super late, and I picked up an Uber from the airport, and I hop in the Uber, and this guy, from the moment he picked me up, cursing, talking against, you know, women, just vile conversation. And I did not say a word the entire time. He just kept on talking, and it was vile and just nasty and horrible. And in the coordinates, I'm being dropped off at the church. So as we pull in to the church, he looks at me and he's like, you know, what are we doing here? And I said, well, I live here, my brother. And he said, you're a priest? And I said, yeah. He's like, I'm so sorry. And I said, listen, man. I said, you should probably be very mindful of how you talk to people. And he says, yeah, I will. I'm sorry. I said, hey, man, I forgive you, but I think this is a wonderful thing that God's provided to you tonight. So God bless. I'll be praying for you, and have a good night. And he left. Right. So it's just like things like that would never happen. You know, how many conversations have I had with people where they say, if I would have known you were a priest, I would have never talked to you. That happens to me all the time.
Well, I think, you know, if I think there's people like, cause I've been with you where, you know, we were in Vegas at a convention, that NAB and
National Association of Broadcasters,
right? So yeah, so we're there. You know, we have a really good time. And we were at a I forget the name of the game, but it's really cheap to play. It's kind of fun, you know. We were hanging out with these people.
What card am I thinking of?
What's that? What game?
Yeah, I thought you had the
I
casino
think it was like
from
roulette or something like that, where you could bet on red or something and black.
I think you're right. I think it was roulette.
And we were just having fun. I mean, we were gambling like a cheap table. It was $1 bet, you know, and we stayed there. We had a lot of fun with these people, and we're leaving, and it's late. You know, you don't realize how late it is sometimes, and it's late, and lo and behold, I'm like looking for him, hanging out with some of the other guys and gals that were there. And I'm like, where did Father Rich go? And they're like, he's a priest.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. And we look around and he's over there praying over some guy at the slot machines, you know? And they're talking and literally like the next day we go to the pool and the pool's closed, right? I don't know why. And then so we decide, okay, we're going to go have a beer. So we go to this bar, we have a beer. A friend calls me from a Catholic organization. And he's like, hey, you know, I don't want to name them.
I know, don't name
But
them.
and so I'm like, yeah, come see us, whatever. So we're talking, right? Not even 5 minutes into this guy is like just getting all into Father Rich to the point where, I mean, he was like crying, you know, later just because the guy was such a jerk. And it was all over him not wearing his priestly garb. And I'm like telling the guy, like, dude, we were going to the pool, you know, like we were going to the pool. So if you're one of those people, and I think this is a dynamic that has changed generationally that needs some explanation, because yeah, there was a generation in our church that they wore jeans and they tried to be cool and relevant and all this other garbage. And I think they destroyed a lot of what the church could have built up. However, we're in a day and age where, you know, if your ministry, Father, and God's granted this to you, in your ministry, if you're able to reach people in this particular manner and you feel the need to do it, like, who are we to tell you that, you know, you're a horrible priest for going to the pool and not going up and changing and then go, you know, I mean, you get to the point where there's a lot of people that have been affected by this that are still kind of hitting that drum.
You know, I always think that, you know, obviously I think it's great when priests do wear their clerics out in public as opposed to civilian clothes. Mm-hmm. But I also understand why there's times where like, look, I just want to have a dinner and I need a little time off. But whenever someone gets really kind of militant about it and they're like, oh, any priest who wears, you know, regular clothes is, you know, Vatican II modernist heretic. I just think of the walk to Emmaus where our Lord at that, you know, he did not even show himself in his resurrected form. He showed himself in a form that was, you know, very, I guess, approachable to these people. And I think there's a really good analogous thought there that our Lord also used kind of dressing down to be able to be a pastoral tool. So, you know, is it
the
good
gardener, the homeless, the poor? It's true.
St. Martin, the homeless man, and St. Martin. You know, there's a lot of times where our Lord has appeared or allowed himself to be seen in something less than the full glory of the second person of the Trinity for a reason. So if you're on priests and if you're watching, you know, something on YouTube where they say any priest who doesn't wear his collar all the time is a modernist heretic, tell them to shut up.
Shut up.
You know? And you know what's interesting too is like many of these people have like such strong opinions about what priests should be, but they wouldn't have the courage at all to become one. Right. Or a sister,
right?
You know, like maybe you should have become a priest. You know, like
no vocation director would have them because they'd see the imbalance in their personality.
Oh, it's just it's crazy. You know how nasty people can be sometimes.
The other thing too, when I lived in D.C., I went to Bethesda with a priest for lunch. You know, and he was working, right? I mean, it was like going to the parish, picking him up. I saw his new, you know, rectory in the parish. He gave, let's go get a bite to eat, right? So we go get a bite to eat. There were people spitting at this guy, spitting at him. You know, I'm like, I wouldn't. I mean, after a while, it would get kind of old. You know, for me, I'd be like, all right, you know, I'm not gonna go.
And let me tell you, when you go to a place where you know people are having some drinks, or you go to a place and like people are out at a nice dinner, whatever, and they see you in your clerics. I mean, like you're a target. Right. Yeah. And you're going to get sucked into a conversation that will go nowhere.
Yep.
Yeah. And people say, oh, well, you need to be a heroic priest and you need to stand up and are the saints willing to be martyred. That's not martyrdom. Come on. No. That's you know,
harassment.
That's harassment. It's different. Harassment. You're not denying the cross.
It is harassment.
You know, it's all right. So I think one last topic is that people have asked is, you know, you sin. You're a priest, but you sin too, just like everyone else does. You're imperfect, right? So how often do priests, go to confession? How do you manage to keep yourself in a state of grace? What happens if a priest is not in a state of grace, is in a state of mortal sin, but still celebrates mass? Is the Eucharist still valid, right? What are some of the scenarios around the life of, the poor sinner in the priesthood?
Mm-hmm. So, my recommendation, something that I try to follow very sincerely, is like every 3 weeks or so, like every month at least, that I need to go to confession if I'm struggling and I'm overcompensating because I'm going through a lot or something like that, or I'm really challenged in some way and I'm sinning a lot more. I'll definitely go more frequently. And it's tough, man. I mean, you have to make it a discipline to go to confession monthly, because it's very, very easy to get sucked into the work. And then you look at the calendar and you're like, it has been a month and a half. It's been 2 months since my last confession. And I'm sure there's brothers out there right now they haven't been to confession in years, or maybe it's a full year and they don't go until the retreat. We have annual retreats. I'm sure there's guys out there that especially when it comes to the inner workings of the apostles, saying who's the greatest. There could be a lot of inner kind of, turmoil where it's like, do you want to ask your neighboring priest to go to confession? For me, I'm very blessed. I've got a couple of priests that I absolutely love.
So do some priests maybe avoid going to confession because they don't want to, for political reasons, allow the neighboring priest to have a leg up on them?
I don't want to go to my brother, in my own diocese. Like some guy, and that's cool, man. Like, I understand that. Just go to your neighboring diocese, develop a friendship with a guy in the neighboring diocese. Because maybe some of your sinfulness is related to the presbyterate that you're in. That's very likely.
I mean,
very likely.
So what you're saying, all priests don't get along with each other?
We are human. We are very human. No, I mean, like, that's life, man. It's life. It's the people you work closest with. You're going to be critical of the thing you're most passionate about, right? So you're going to fall into those pockets. You got to go to confession, right? Humble yourself. Maybe go to a brother priest that, you be humble. But, like when Timmy and I get together, we go to confession to each other. Olita, like he's such a good brother. There's other brothers outside of the diocese that I feel very, very comfortable with, going to confession. I just think it's a different, it's like, I always think of the story of JP2, I'm going to show you a picture of JP2.
Right there. Yeah.
Hello, Father Richard.
So John Paul, like with that priest that lost his faculties and he's like begging outside of the church, and JP2 finds out about him and he brings him up to the papal apartment and has him hear his confession. Like, that's just, man, what a saint.
Yeah. Really? I never heard that story.
Oh, it's such a cool story. So, like we've got to humble ourselves, think about having to sit there and listen to the Pope's confession. Like I think sometimes, like, what if Bishop Esteves came to confession to me? Like, I'd kind of feel a little nervous,
I would, yeah.
It's just human. It's human stuff. But I know, especially as it relates to our sinfulness, ecclesia supplet, the Holy Spirit, the church will provide, the Holy Spirit provides, and in these circumstances, I just think it's best that we humble ourselves and avail ourselves to the regularity of the sacrament of reconciliation. Right now, I'm in need of going to confession. I'm trying to nail down some time with our boy, Father Tetlow, so I can get to confession. He's my regular go-to. But yeah, that's, I would definitely.
And since we're on sacraments, Vinny wants to know, he's a first Holy Communicant here.
And I got to hear his first confession too.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. He wants to know, when transubstantiation occurs, is there a zap in your fingers that you can feel?
There are moments where you are drawn into the mystical.
Yeah.
But it happens at different moments. It's like whenever I celebrate baptism, I'll be at a moment where I've never been so deeply hit And then I'll just start tearing up and I'll just be so present mystically to what God's doing. Same thing at Mass. My sacristan, who knows me very, very well, big shout out to our Patreon, Christian Erasmus. Christian
Awesome,
knows me so well. He immediately, he's like, you were really hit very deeply there. What happened? And he'll like ask me about it. You know, and then I'll open up my heart and just say like, yeah, when I extended my hands or at this part of the Eucharistic prayer, it just became so clear, you know, and so different times, certainly at the epiclesis, when I extend my hands over the gifts, I haven't felt zaps yet, but I have been moved very deeply in the Holy Spirit. When the parish came open, St. John Paul II, where I'm now the pastor, when I received an email transmission that this parish came open, I was in San Antonio preaching a mission, and I was discerning, like, is God calling me to the mission fields of being online and you know, going around and doing these missions?
You were bent out of shape that week. We were golfing that week, and I remember, you were not carrying your end of the golf course, man, because you're all on discernment, like thinking about what you're doing. Della Cross,
I know, and I couldn't stop. I know, I feel bad for you guys because you have to deal with my extroverted discernment, and I'm like, what do I do? You know,
well, I was just upset because you were all discerning and talking about whether you should be a missionary or a pastor, and Della Cross is smoking us in golf.
Delacrosse has this unbelievable ability to just tune everything out and just like hyper focus on golf. It's very, very good.
He really does. It's called booze.
So yeah, when I opened up that email, I had like an electrical shock through my spine, dude. I just knew that I needed to put my name in for this parish. And I'm so blessed to be here. So yeah, there's moments like that for sure where you just really feel zapped by the Lord, and directed and influenced. Certainly.
So then the last part of that question is, what happens if a priest is not, though, in a state of grace? Mm-hmm. Are the sacraments that he performs, are those still valid?
Ecclesia supplet, right? The church supplies in that same respect. They're the efficacy and the substance of transubstantiation, like the effective body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ is still there, even though a priest may be celebrating in mortal sin or really completely doubting the presence of Jesus. Look how many Eucharistic miracles have taken place with people who have doubted at the altar. Mm-hmm. And Jesus transformed not only through transubstantiation, but literally a transformation of the accidents of the transubstantiated presence of Jesus Christ under the appearance of bread and wine. The accents of the actual bread turned to true flesh and blood. So check out Eucharistic Miracles. If you've never heard that before, type in Eucharistic Miracles in Google. There's some awesome books out there. Lanciano is one. There's another one in Cascia, Italy, where, you know, a priest took the host and he was going to visit a sick person and just kind of threw Jesus into his breviary, not into a pyx, not with any type of reverence. And, you know, it turned the pages to blood that the host was next to. And the accidents changed to flesh and blood and is on display in the Church of St. Rita underneath in the tomb area. Really, really powerful. But there's Eucharistic miracles all over the place. Brazil, all over the world, that have happened throughout time and are still on display and have been scientifically analyzed and show that they're all of the same blood type and of the same tissues of the heart, of the main aorta of the heart, which is pretty fascinating stuff, that they would all over the world be that same type of tissue and that same type of blood type.
We should do a show on that.
We have.
We have
five unbelievable but true miracles. I will put a link right.
You were zoned. You were zoned in. There. You were zoned into golf on that day.
Yeah. It's going to be right here. Click this little button right here.
Remember the time though we were in LA and we were in the middle of a show and you were watching baseball the entire time.
That was a boring show. You guys talk too much. No, man, like I think we could do one on the heart. I don't know if we did one on that specific miracle or not.
We did. We covered Lanciano. You were watching baseball. It was the season when the Astros were cheating their way to the title.
Low blow. Mud on a show, all right?
Low blow.
So, hey, before we close out, a couple things. Number one, all of our patrons, we really appreciate it. If you go to patreon.com/Catholic Talk Show or Catholic Talk Show /Patreon, you go to the same place and you'll find all the ways that you can support us. There's a lot of really cool gifts. There's hoodies, coffee cups, stickers, all kinds of cool things. We really appreciate it when you do, and we can't do the show without you. So thank you to all of our patron members. It means everything to us. Also go to catholictalkshow.com. Make sure you subscribe to us there. You can enter our mailing list. You can follow us on social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you click that subscribe button, like this video, and make sure you subscribe. That way you'll be notified anytime there's a new video. It really helps us. But I think the last thing that I wanted to cover, though, Father Rich, is real briefly, what is the worst thing about being a priest, and what is the best thing about being a priest?
The cross is gone.
Stay focused.
The worst thing and the best thing. This is a tough Inquisition question here. Well, the best thing, in all honesty, is being at the altar together and celebrating the Eucharist. Like that. That's without a doubt.
It better be.
That the source and summit of our faith. That is most certainly the best thing. Being together at the altar. The worst thing, though, that's a tough one.
Or the hardest thing, maybe worst.
Oh, challenging thing?
Yeah, maybe the most challenging. Yeah, I don't want to say the worst thing because that's maybe a negative framing of the question. What's the most challenging thing about being a priest?
Yeah, I think fundraising is tough. Like, we've got like a huge debt to the diocese that we've got to cover, and we're becoming a parish, which means that we're going to be taxed, and it's like forecasting all of that and trying to grow and maintain the important things. But at the same time, we're bursting at the seams and we're growing past our capacity, and I'm by myself. So I'm just like, how do we build out this campus so that we can manage the amount of people that are coming here to be fed? So that's pretty.
I think that goes right back to the apostles too. They're like, man, we got 5,000 people here, and how are we going to feed them? And oh no,
exactly.
Like even the first, the first pastors, those first priests, the apostles, they dealt with that same thing. So I don't think that's really went away.
That's very consoling to put that in the context that way, because just trusting in the miraculous hand of God, and I've seen the miraculous hand of God come to our community so often, and Saint Joseph manifesting his hand in huge ways, and Our Lady. So we have seen some major challenges in every single, my first year, Christmas, we can't have mass inside, so we build this huge tent, and then the floodwaters come, and then we have to take care of the floodwaters, prep for Christmas. Most beautiful Christmas ever. Coronavirus sets in. My first Lent and Easter is shut down, and we've got to pivot and go online and come up with beautiful ways to minister to people. I mean, it's just been nonstop. So those have been super challenging experiences. But I love a challenge, man. So I'm enjoying
I always
it.
think priests that are coming up right now that are in your position, first-time pastors, young priests, it's almost like people who grew up in the Great Depression, then went off and had to fight World War II, and they ended up being called the greatest generation because their formative years were so challenged. There were so many things thrown at them that they were forced to become more adaptive and stronger-willed and more disciplined. So hopefully the same thing is happening to the priests who are coming of age now, who had to deal with the sexual abuse crisis. They had to deal with coronavirus and their churches being closed. They had to deal with, less people coming to mass. They had to deal with all these things. So maybe, hopefully, like it did with, the American generation, maybe this generation will be one of those great generations of priests because of it.
I would agree with you, because that's how it's proven itself. Every historical generation that went through a challenge or a plague, or, some of the most impressive saints have been drawn up from the grassroots level in response to struggles within the church, or tensions, or evil, or hypocrisy, or heresy. The saints have come, by way of God nurturing them through the negative, through the via negativa, to recognize and boldly go at these challenges. And I definitely look at my brother priests and sisters out there that are responding. They're an inspiration, man. They're such an inspiration to me. And I love seeing what they're doing. So keep that up. And I have to share wonderful news. A number of years back, we started a program called In Persona Christi, and we had like next to no seminarians in our diocese at that time. And we had a good outpouring of people's interests, and we had a first wave of guys that radically transformed the culture of being a seminarian in the Diocese of St. Augustine. But in the context of everything we have faced, from the sexual abuse crisis to coronavirus, just a few weeks back before the beginning of the year, we had a record number of guys that are down to earth, just regular guys, open to the call of the priesthood. Over 41 or 43 guys attended that retreat, and the largest number we've ever had. So, and a number of them are already pursuing and becoming seminarians for our diocese. We're praying for the same thing in and around the country right now, because I think people are really seeing that, you know, there's something in the church, and there's, you know, when there's a lack in society and there's a breakdown in society, when there's division and heartbreak and heartache, even in the church, and the division in the church, you know, it's going to crop up with a new generation of people that are going to mend the differences and to heal the wounds.
Yeah, I think it was Bishop Janke of Peoria that said the time for casual Catholicism is over, and now it's really a call to heroic Catholicism, because there's really no other options now. There's no real, can't really be a casual Catholic today. It just doesn't really work. You're kind of dissolved into nothing like that. And especially with the call to the priesthood, it's not just like, well, you know, every second or third son a family has just gets sent off to the priesthood because they don't have economic opportunities. I mean, men and women who join religious orders and calls really have to want it. So really, I do pray for a great generation of religious and priests and consecrated.
Yeah, the lay are getting much more involved too. I remember being in the seminary many years ago, and there wasn't a lot of outreach and lay ministers, and you know, there were some people with books and your Karapi and your Han, but now it's just like, I mean, just in Fusati, like we see all these amazing people doing these amazing things, and it's just starting to, you know, roll, and it's good. It's a good thing, you know.
Well, Father Rich, I really, you know, I think everyone who watched this is very grateful that you were able to open up, share some of the kind of realistic things that happened with the priest, some of the real struggles, some of the things that are dark, and then some of the joys and some of the levity, especially young men considering the priesthood. Really watch this video. If you have questions, you know, your vocation director will help you, but there's some realities to being a priest that very few things can prepare you for besides the lived experience. And Father Rich, really thank you for sharing that. I think it's going to be very helpful to people to understand what their priest is going through so that they can support their priestly vocation as a lay person, and then people who are discerning can have maybe a more firsthand look at it. So thank you very much.
And, you know, to everybody out there, and I really appreciate those words, Sheil. You know, if you are out there and you're discerning a call to the priesthood or the religious life, just hear the words of JP2, who lived so courageously and heroically in his own generation, and think about how the challenges he faced through Nazism and communism, and, you know, his whole family, you know, passing away, and him being by himself, like really left an orphan. And, but, you know, be not afraid. Be not afraid to be intrepid witnesses of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is a beautiful call. And if you feel a stirring in the power of the Spirit and God is speaking to your heart to explore it, do not hesitate. Go in haste and respond to that call. You know, yeah, are there challenges? Of course. Is there darkness that you wrestle with? Is the darkness of your own personal sin something you wrestle with? Yeah, but don't you want to be in that fight? Because the victory of Christ is well worth the fight. And when you get to see him winning, when you see his victory and that you are participating in that fight, there is nothing more beautiful to be a part of. So please, please pray, my brothers and sisters. If you're married, if you're a listener or a viewer of our content, please, please pray for young people to consider the call to the priesthood and the religious life. If you're a couple newly married and you haven't had kids yet, start having kids. Have 7, 8, 9, 10 kids. Have a bunch of kids. Glorify God with your fruitfulness. And I'm sure if you are faithful before God, God is most certainly going to be faithful to you. And I'm sure he's going to bless the church with a number of young men and women to be called to the priesthood and religious life through your fruitfulness, through your faith. And we need our Catholics to respond in that way, not to just send off the kids to the convent or to the diocese or anything like that, but to cultivate kids that discern God's call for their life. And we are all called to greatness. So I pray for each of you. Please pray for us. And we thank you for your support of the show. And we'll see you next week. God bless.